You're a burden, a failure. Those were the words my father said to me over dinner right before he raised his glass to toast my sister, the golden child who would inherit everything. I sat there, 19 years old, my joints aching from the disease I've carried since I was 8, and watched as they smiled without even looking in my direction. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just quietly excused myself, wheeled out the front door, and didn't look back. That night, something in me snapped. I thought the worst pain was the disease that left me too weak to run, to dance, to even hold a fork some days. But I was wrong. The worst pain is knowing your family stopped seeing you as a person and started treating you like an inconvenience. But what I didn't know then was that someone in that very room had caused my illness. When I was 8 years old, my body began to betray me. It started with exhaustion, not the normal. I played too much at recess kind, but the bone-deep kind that made it hard to get out of bed. Then came the joint pain. My knees would swell, my fingers stiffened like old tree branches. I cried at night, not because I was scared, but because I didn't understand why my body hurt so much just from existing. At first, my mom thought I was faking. "You're probably just tired from school," she'd say, brushing it off. But one morning, I collapsed on the kitchen floor trying to reach the cereal box. I couldn't feel my legs. I looked up and saw my father frown, not in worry, but in annoyance. That's when they finally took me to a doctor. The tests went on for weeks. Blood work scans, pokes, prods. I remember the cold sting of the needle and the silence in the room after the specialist read my chart. "She has a rare autoimmune disease," the doctor said, folding his hands. "Her immune system is attacking her own muscles and joints. It's degenerative, chronic, and painful." I didn't understand all the words, but I remember my mom going pale. My dad looked at me like I was broken merchandise. After that, everything changed. I was pulled from gym class. My school attendance dropped. The friends I used to have stopped calling because I was always sick. I started using braces for my knees, then a cane, then a wheelchair when flare-ups got too bad. I missed birthday parties, I missed field trips, I missed being a normal kid. But what I missed most was the way my parents used to look at me. At first they tried, kind of. They bought me supplements, took me to a couple more doctors, but by the time I turned 10, I noticed the way their tone shifted when I asked for help. "Don't be so dramatic, Mara," Mom would snap. "She just wants attention," Dad muttered once, thinking I couldn't hear him. Then came the comparisons to Harper. Harper, my older sister who danced, ran marathons, got straight A's, smiled for pictures. The daughter they showcased, the daughter they never had to worry about dragging to the ER in the middle of the night. I started to fade in my own home. I stopped asking for rides. I stopped mentioning the pain. I learned how to swallow silence like medicine, bitter but necessary. I didn't know it then, but that disease was never the only thing that was eating away at me. It was also the absence, the emotional coldness that wrapped around me tighter than the illness ever could. And somewhere deep down, a question began to take root I'd bury for years. Why did this happen to me? And why did they stop caring so fast? If I was the burden, Harper was the blessing. Everything she touched turned to gold ore. At least that's how my parents told it. While I lay curled up on the couch with ice packs on my joints, Harper was on stage accepting medals. While I struggled to hold a pencil through tremors, she was getting published in the school newspaper. She was everything I wasn't. Healthy, social, photogenic, uncomplicated. Our house was filled with framed photos of her winning swim meets, holding certificates, dressed in prom gowns like a page out of a glossy catalog. Meanwhile, my room had become a quiet cave. No one came in. No one asked how my physical therapy was going. I don't think they even remembered when my next infusion was due. Sometimes I wondered if they kept me around just so Harper would look even more perfect by comparison. At the dinner table, Dad would beam at her. "Harper's going to make it big. A real future ahead of her." He never said that about me. Mom would plan entire weekends around Harper's recital. But if I had a doctor's appointment, it was, "Can't your friend's mom take you?" There was one birthday, my 14th, when I asked if we could just have dinner together. Nothing fancy, they forgot. But 2 weeks later, they threw Harper a backyard party with fairy lights, a live band, and 70 guests. I stayed in my room and watched the lights flicker through the blinds. But it wasn't just the celebration that hurt. It was how my sister looked at me. There was a time we were close. When we were little, she'd read to me when I was stuck in bed. She even snuck cookies into my room after dinner. But after I got sick, something shifted. She started to avoid me like my pain was contagious, or worse, embarrassing, like she was ashamed. Sometimes I'd catch her glancing at me when I was struggling to move, just a flash of something in her eyes. Not pity, not concern, something sharper. Guilt, resentment. Once I found her crying in the bathroom. I asked what was wrong and she screamed, "Why can't you just be normal?" She apologized later, but I never forgot the way her voice cracked, like something inside her had finally slipped out. That was the moment I realized Harper wasn't just the perfect daughter in their eyes. She needed to be. She'd been cast in that role. And I broken, quiet, messy was the cautionary tale. I wondered if she hated me for being sick, or if she hated herself for being the healthy one. Either way, I was already losing her, not just to college applications and perfect boyfriends and the glittery path ahead, but to something darker, a distance that grew with every passing year. And I couldn't shake the thought maybe she wasn't just running toward success. Maybe she was running away from me. It was a Friday night when everything cracked open. Mom had spent the entire day in the kitchen roasting rosemary chicken, setting the table with the good plates, lighting tapered candles like it was Christmas. Harper had just gotten accepted into NYU on a full-ride scholarship. Dad even took off work early, which never happened. The house buzzed with celebration. No one mentioned me. I sat at the far end of the table, my wheelchair angled so I wouldn't block the hallway. My joints were stiff that night. I'd overexerted during therapy, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to ruin anything. I never wanted to ruin anything. Dinner was loud. Laughter, wine glasses clinking, Harper glowing under the chandelier. I picked at my food, stomach twisting. Then Dad stood up and raised his glass. To Harper, he said, voice rich with pride. The pride of this family, the one who never gave us trouble, never let pain be an excuse, never stopped moving forward. The words stung, but I smiled. I clapped like everyone else. Then Mom added, "We're so proud of you, sweetheart, which is why we've made a decision." I looked up. Dad cleared his throat, glancing at Mom before continuing. "We've decided that all our assets, this house, the trust fund, the savings account, will be left to Harper." For a moment, I thought I misheard. But what about me? The words slipped out small and fragile. The room went quiet. You could hear the silverware stop midair. Dad didn't even look at me. "Mara, you've needed so much from us over the years. It's only fair that Harper gets the life she earned. You've cost us more than you realize." Mom nodded, not meeting my eyes. "You're a burden, honey. We still love you, but we have to be realistic." I stared at them, the words slicing deeper than any pain my disease had ever brought. My sister sat in silence, cheeks flushed. She didn't speak, didn't protest. She just looked down at her plate. And in that moment, I realized I was truly alone in that house. I didn't shout, I didn't argue. I just placed my fork down quietly, wiped my mouth with the napkin, and said, "Thank you for dinner." Then I turned my wheelchair around and left. No one followed. I rolled myself down the hallway, my chest burning. Not from illness, but from something worse. Abandonment, invalidation. The knowledge that to the people who were supposed to protect me, I was nothing but a weight on their shoulders. I packed that night just a few clothes, my sketchbook, a bottle of medication, and the silence that had followed me for years. I left before sunrise while the house still slept. It wasn't just an exit. It was a farewell to the idea that I ever had a place there. And as I wheeled into the cold morning air, one question whispered in the back of my mind. How did this begin? What if the illness wasn't just fate, but something done to me? The first night away from home, I slept on the floor of Josie's guest room, curled beneath a borrowed blanket. The carpet scratched my skin, and my joints ached worse than usual. But for the first time in years, I could breathe. Josie had been my only friend who stuck around after middle school. She had a sharp wit, an older sister in med school, and a quiet kind of compassion, the kind that didn't ask questions unless you were ready to answer. When I texted her, "Can I crash with you?" she replied in under a minute, "Of course, come." For days I floated between sleep and silence. Josie left me tea. Her mom offered warm soup and never once asked why I'd shown up with a duffel bag and tears that wouldn't fall. I stayed in my room staring out the window, trying to make sense of everything. Until one morning, I opened my medical file. It wasn't complete, just photocopies I'd taken years ago when switching pediatricians. But there it was. My diagnosis dated when I was 8. Lab results, vague notes, and one line I'd never noticed before. Initial symptoms presented following suspected exposure to corticosteroid compounds. Review prior ingestion. My stomach dropped. What compound? I dug deeper, pulling up my pharmacy app. Old appointment notes, even mom's text reminders. Nothing added up. I'd never been prescribed anything like that before my diagnosis. Then I remembered something strange. A flu I'd had the month before it all started. High fever, nausea, hives. It lasted 2 days. My parents said it was just a virus. But what if it wasn't? I went online and typed in keywords: children prednisone, exposure, immune reaction, neuromuscular damage. The results made my hands shake. Certain corticosteroids, especially in high doses or in combination with immune triggers, could cause lasting autoimmune reactions in children, especially those with genetic predispositions. I didn't want to believe it, but a memory bubbled up, fuzzy and out of place. Harper, 10 years old, holding out a pink smoothie. Drink it, dummy. I made it just for you. She'd grinned, wide teeth stained with berries. I'd thrown it up an hour later. I never thought about that day again until now. No, it couldn't be. It had to be coincidence. Harper was just a kid. She wouldn't. She couldn't. Could she? The spiral began. What if it hadn't been an accident? What if it was a prank gone wrong? What if my parents knew I needed answers, but they wouldn't come from Google or from medical files? They would come from the one place I never wanted to return home. Because if there was even the smallest chance that what happened to me wasn't fate, but a choice someone made, then I needed to know the truth. I waited 3 days before going back. My parents were out of town for the weekend. Harper had posted about it on Instagram, of course. A family getaway to the mountains. I stared at her smiling face framed by pine trees and felt a wave of something I couldn't name. Betrayal, maybe, or dread. I wheeled up to the house on Sunday afternoon, the street empty, wind brushing dead leaves across the sidewalk. The key was still hidden behind the loose brick near the porch, same place it had always been. They never thought I'd need it again. Inside, the house felt colder than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally, like every corner knew I didn't belong here anymore. I bypassed the living room, ignoring the photos on the wall. Harper in her cap and gown. Harper with her dance team. Harper standing between our parents like the sun they revolved around. There were none of me. Not anymore. I went straight to Harper's room. It was pristine, of course. Neatly made bedrose gold desk lamp, a wall of trophies. Everything screamed perfection. But I wasn't here for that. I was here for the past. I checked her desk drawers. Nothing. Closet shoes, dresses, old notebooks with class notes. Then I saw it tucked behind a shoebox labeled 8th grade memories. A floral pattern journal. I hesitated. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. But I opened it. It wasn't recent. The entries were messy, scrawled in a 10-year-old's handwriting. It started like any childhood diary. Today, I got an A on my spelling test. Mom forgot to pick me up again. Innocent things until one page stopped me cold. Mara is sick again. Mom says we have to be nice, but I hate it. She always gets attention. She cries and everyone runs to her. No one sees me. Then the next I took the pills from Uncle Dean's drawer. He's always talking about steroids helping people get stronger. Maybe if Mara has a tiny dose, she'll stop faking. I blinked. No. I put it in her smoothie. Only a little. She threw up. Maybe she'll learn not to fake anymore. My hands trembled. I flipped forward. Mara can't walk good now. Everyone's so worried. I didn't mean it. I just wanted her to stop being so needy. I didn't mean it. Then silence. Pages blank. I dropped the journal on the floor. My sister had poisoned me. Maybe not with malice, maybe not knowing the full consequences, but she did it. And my parents, they must have found out. Why else hide this? Why else sweep everything under the rug and let me believe my body had turned on itself? The truth had always been hair buried beneath trophies and polished smiles. I picked up the journal, holding it like it might burn through my skin. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt cold. They had taken my childhood, my health, my voice. But now I had something they didn't expect. Proof. I didn't sleep that night. I held the journal on my lap in Josie's guest room, flipping through it again and again, hoping I'd misread something, that maybe it was a game, a story, a sick child's fantasy. But no matter how many times I read the shaky handwriting, the meaning stayed the same. My sister had given me steroids, unprescribed, unauthorized, dangerous, and my life was never the same. The next morning, I made a choice. I texted Harper. "We need to talk today," she replied 2 minutes later. "I'm free after class. Come by around 3:00. She had no idea what was coming. The house was quiet when I arrived. Mom was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. Dad was working in the garage. Harper was upstairs. I rolled in and waited in the living room. No one greeted me. No one even asked how I'd been. Just silence, the same suffocating kind I'd grown up under. Harper came down in leggings and a sweatshirt holding her phone. "Hey, Mara," she said like nothing had happened. I pulled the journal from my bag and set it on the coffee table. She froze. "What's that? You tell me," I said, voice shaking because I read every word. Her face drained of color. "Two, don't. You put something in my drink when I was 8. You stole steroids from Uncle Dean's cabinet and gave them to me. You started this and I turned toward the kitchen. They covered it up. Footsteps. Mom stepped in, her eyes wide. Dad followed seconds later. "Malene, what's going on?" Mom asked, her voice tight. "I know," I said. "I know everything." Harper sank onto the couch, trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I was just angry. I thought you were faking. I was a kid. You were 10. I snapped old enough to know better. She didn't know what it would do," Dad said defensively. "But you did," I said. "You both did. You found out. And instead of telling the truth or getting me proper care, you let me grow up thinking I was broken by biology, by fate. You let me live in pain for 10 years alone." Mom wrung her hands. "We wanted to protect the family. We didn't want Harper's future ruined over a childish mistake. So you sacrificed mine instead." Harper was crying now, real tears. "But they didn't move me. I lost everything," I said, voice rising. "Friends, school, my body. And all this time, the people who were supposed to love me were hiding the truth." No one spoke. The silence said everything. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. "I've scanned the journal, sent it to my lawyer. If you don't think I'll press charges, think again." Mom gasped. "Malene, you wouldn't." "I would," I said coldly, "unless I get exactly what I deserve. My share of the estate, public acknowledgement, and a written apology from all 3 of you." "That's blackmail," Dad said. "No." I said, "That's justice." They didn't respond. Harper just buried her face in her hands. I stood my joints screaming, but I didn't care. "You took my health, my voice, my childhood, but not my future. Not anymore." Then I left. This time I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I walked. Yes, walked slowly, but without help. Back down the front steps. For once, they were the ones left speechless. And I was the one holding the truth. The days that followed were quiet, but they weren't empty. I didn't hear from my parents or Harper. No calls, no texts, just silence. The kind that used to crush me, but now felt like space I finally owned. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't asking to be seen. I was demanding it. My lawyer, Miss Parker, was a former disability rights advocate with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for injustice. When I showed her the scanned journal, she said one word: leverage. She drafted a formal letter, a demand for an amended estate division, retroactive medical compensation, and a signed admission of guilt kept private but legally binding. If they refused, she warned, I had every right to pursue civil charges against Harper and negligent concealment against my parents. A week later, the response came. They agreed. The estate would be split 50 between me and Harper. A public apology wasn't offered, but Harper sent a private letter, handwritten and messy. "I'm sorry, Mara. I was jealous, scared, and selfish. I ruined your life, and you still had the courage to face us. I'll live with what I did forever. I didn't write back. I didn't need to because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation." With my portion of the estate, I moved into a modest but sunlit apartment downtown, walking distance from my physical therapist and near a park where I could sketch in the afternoons. I also set up something I never thought I'd be able to. The Mara Fund, a small nonprofit that supports teens with chronic and invisible illnesses, especially those dismissed by family. We offer art therapy, legal advocacy, and most importantly, listening ears that believe you the first time. Josie helped me design the logo, Miss Parker joined the board, and one day, Harper donated anonymously under the name For the Ones We Failed. I knew it was her. I didn't erase the past. I didn't pretend things didn't happen, but I built something with the ashes they left behind. And as I rolled open the doors to our first workshop where 6 teenagers sat in a circle with their sketch pads, braces, inhalers, of V-pulls, didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a beginning. The room was quiet except for the soft scratch of pencils on paper. Across from me sat a girl named Lena. She was 13 with dark circles under her eyes and a port in her chest for treatments she didn't talk much about. She drew slowly, deliberately tiny birds in a glass jar. At the end of our session, she looked up at me and asked, "Do you ever feel like people only see what's wrong with you?" I smiled gently. "All the time." She hesitated. "How did you stop letting that define you?" I thought about her question for a long moment about my childhood bed. My sister's silence, the dinner table where I was erased with a single sentence, and the journal that shattered everything I thought I knew. I didn't. I finally said, "Not at first." I let it define me for years. I believed I was the broken one, the mistake. But then I learned something. She waited, eyes wide. I am not the illness. I am not the silence, and I am not the burden. Lena smiled. It wasn't wide, but it was real. That night I sat in my apartment alone, but no longer lonely. The city lights blinked softly through the curtains. My legs still ached. Some days I still needed help to dress or to hold a fork. That part hadn't changed, but I had. I was no longer the girl who begged to be loved by people who only saw her as a problem. I no longer measured my worth by how much space I didn't take up, how quiet I could be, or how little I could ask for. I measured it by every person who walked into that room and whispered, "Me too." The pain didn't vanish. The past didn't rewrite itself. But I had reclaimed something far more powerful than an apology or a share of money. I had reclaimed my story. And if I could offer one truth to anyone out there, anyone who has been called a disappointment, a weight, an inconvenience, it would be this: you are not a burden. You are not the problem. You are not invisible. And you are never, ever alone. Because somewhere out there, someone like me is waiting to say, "I believe you, I see you, and I know what it means to survive."